We just watched The Flash.
The Flash.
Well, Braden, this movie's been a long time coming.
9 years.
9 years. I mean, some would say even longer. People have been waiting even since the 90s for a Flash movie.
Remember me?
What were your thoughts going into the movie, and how have they changed now that you've actually experienced The Flash 2023?
Going into the movie, I had the most ambiguous expectations I think one can have for a movie. Like, it didn't look too good from the trailers to me, and just the idea of this movie being like on the back burner for so long, being made for 9 years, and then controversies come up, and oh, this person's supposed to be in the movie. Never mind, they're not in the movie. Oh, the DCU, this is going to be the beginning of it. No, it's the end of it. You know what I mean? It did look like a generic superhero movie, but this was anything but. Not saying it's a good or bad movie. I'll say I liked it.
It does have some common superhero tropes, some common DC tropes. I heard someone describe this as the most DC movie, and I think that's a pretty good way to describe it. Still have problems with it. It's not a perfect movie, but I would say I felt like it was worth watching and definitely not generic.
This is not a Black Adam
Yes.
or a Wonder Woman 84. I think even the people who may dislike this movie would say it's completely different from those movies.
I imagine this movie will get compared to Black Adam a little bit. Insofar as, first of all, it doesn't seem like it's performing very well at the box office, and the fact that the movie's been hyped up for several... This movie has significant hype around it. Tom Cruise came out and said it was one of the best movies he'd ever seen.
Really?
Yes, he did.
It's a fun time. There's some good, there's some bad, there's some ugly, but overall, if you're a fan of superhero movies, if you followed the DC universe at all, check it out.
Let's get into spoilers.
Finally.
Braden, finally. Oh my gosh, this movie is very hard to not talk about, or to talk about without talking about spoilers.
Right, the movie is almost all spoilers. There's very little known about the movie going in. I mean, there was a lot of like things that leaked and stuff like that, but the trailers didn't show too much out of what we already explicitly was released, you know. So
I'll give sort of just a brief plot synopsis. So Barry Allen has been the Flash for a little bit of time now. He realizes through some events in the movie, and maybe even a previous movie, that he can travel through time, and he prevents the murder of his mother and sort of splinters off a timeline and creates a world without really any metahumans, and he has to save the world from General Zod, and a few other things happen. One thing I appreciate about this movie is it gets going right off the bat, and we're in for a long run time, so that is something I appreciate, and obviously it's The Flash. It's supposed to be kind of fast-paced. How did you feel about the opening action scene, Braden?
I was very confused during the opening. This is the introduction to this movie was also the introduction to this movie's tone, which I feel like is kind of, I don't want to say all over the place, because it is somewhat tonally consistent. I think that like a lot of times, even in this opening scene, like it clashes a lot. The scene is he's trying to like save these babies, and like I understand it's supposed to be like a comedic scene, and it is. You know, I was laughing during it, but at the same time, like. Barry's like hungry during it, and he's like, "Oh, I got to get food" and stuff like that. And it's like, it's funny, but it's funny because you're like, "Wow, the Flash is a dick." You know what I mean? You're starting off this movie with your superhero being hateable, but not in like a good way, not in like a he has much to learn kind of way. More in just like what is Flash doing?
Now, see, I think on second viewing, what it sort of brought in for me was this idea of. It introduces the Flash as sort of master of time. Us as the audience were like, Barry, save the falling babies out of the sky. Yeah. But I mean, to him, he has flash time, he slows down, and he needs to charge up before he gets the actual babies. I'm not saying that was a good scene, but just upon second rewatch, I understood that criticism you had, and then I had a little bit of a different perspective.
Yeah, I think the theme is clearly introduced. You know, the whole movie is just about how like messy Barry's life is essentially. Like he's bad at time management. That's what he has to learn. He's bad at time management, and he's bad at letting things go. That scene does get that across, but it gets it across in a way that's like, it almost feels like the movie's making fun of itself. You know what I mean? And like that for me is something that persisted somewhat throughout the rest of the movie, but especially in that opening scene, it kind of irked me and bugged me.
Now, also in this opening sequence, we get cameos from two other DCEU characters. We get Ben Affleck's Batman, well, actually three. Ben Affleck's Batman, Jeremy Irons' Alfred, and Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
How'd you feel about their inclusion in the movie?
They were so lame in this movie. Like, not only just lame, but like, ugly, very ugly looking. This is quite an ugly looking film from a CGI, special effects, costume design. A lot of things in this movie just look wrong.
Ben Affleck's Batsuit in motion in this looks kind of cool, and then when he stands still for like a second, you're like, that looks awful.
Right.
Like it's got these weird hexagonal patterns, and it's blue, which is kind of cool that they finally.
I didn't even know it was
blue. Yeah, it was
blue.
a blue cowl.
I didn't even notice.
Yeah, but there's also just like his face doesn't fit quite right. I think it's also seeing that suit in the daytime, which they hadn't done yet.
First shot you see of Ben Affleck, it's like his face, and he's riding a motorcycle, and it's obviously done in like a lot of green screen CGI. They're doing a lot of tweaking on it, and I couldn't even tell if it was Ben Affleck.
Yeah.
Like I was like, did they just CGI him into this movie? And then Wonder Woman shows up. She says some cheesy bullshit dialogue. And
she's there for like 2 seconds. But that's probably the last we see of those characters. We see Ben Affleck like one more time in the movie.
Right, yeah. It just did not work for me at all. I mean, it makes sense because it's like, oh, this is our universe. We have to work with it. But like, the execution was just not there.
How do we feel about, maybe not Ezra Miller as a person, but Ezra Miller as this Barry Allen in this portrayal?
It's something. I can't really like give a definitive opinion. Sometimes he has great moments in this movie where I'm like, wow, that's a superhero, you know? That's Flash. And he does some like heartfelt scenes in this movie pretty well, I'd say. But there's other times when he's doing lame jokes. There's times when he's doing funny jokes. Like he's constantly riding the line between being that annoying character from like Justice League. Overall, he works good enough. Maybe not some other roles that Ezra Miller plays in this movie. Does he work?
I think they sort of found a way to make it work in this movie. Maybe not necessarily as like just the Flash in general, because they do have the dynamic of the two Barrys. I think this movie actually found a way to manage some of the DC humor a bit better. Justice League felt like it was too much trying to be like a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
Whereas this still feels like a DC movie, but the comedy is more, I think they found a better balance with it compared to previous DC
I will say
movies.
this movie has like its own identity in terms of comedy. It's not the Marvel thing where it's like one-liners or whatever. Like it's more like goofy and silly, I would say. A lot of more like visual gags and things like that. Oh, Barry's saving babies, you know?
Yeah.
But sometimes it just like I said, it's writing a line between, oh, this movie's almost making fun of itself, and it can be like annoying and egregious. And sometimes it's actually funny, and I'm like, wow, that's a great like concept for a scene that's comedic and also like progresses the story forward, you know?
So Barry is trying to exonerate his dad, and that's not really working out very well. And he realizes that he can turn back time and he can prevent his mother's murder. The reason the father's alibi was that he went to go buy tomato sauce, and if the mom didn't have, if she had the tomato sauce in the first place, he wouldn't have left, and then the mom wouldn't have died. And I mean, they're really kind of trying to go out of their way to not like show who murders the mother.
It was me, Barry.
Let's talk about the look of the time travel in the movie.
Okay.
How'd you feel about the Chrono Ball?
Cool idea, bad execution. Like I mean, you can say that for a lot of effects in this movie, where like a lot of times they'll have like a really cool idea for a scene, and if you told me it was like test footage, I'd be like, wow, this movie's gonna look sick. But it's released like that.
Yes.
You know, writers did a fine enough job, and the ideas people behind those scenes did a good enough job. But the effects, they're just either not finished or they just went with a bad style.
Okay, so Barry comes into the new timeline. He comes out a little too early because he's pushed out by the Dark Flash. And he's in 2013, and he meets a younger version of himself. His mother's alive, and this younger version of Barry is kind of a douchebag. I mean, normal Barry is also kind of a douchebag.
Yeah.
But what I like is that other reviewers have pointed out that, Ezra Miller as Flash has always been a really good kind of supporting character. Maybe not really good, but has been a supporting character. And now that we get to see older Barry and younger Barry can see sort of how obnoxious he is.
Yeah.
And it gives sort of a chance for character growth in a way. And it's sort of like you said, the movie's kind of trying to make fun of itself, being like, wow, look at like what a weird take on Flash this is.
Yeah.
While still being like, but this is a cool take on Flash, right?
Yeah. Older Barry worked and didn't work for me. He was a great plot device, and I like what we do with him later. Like, it makes sense to have him be this annoying brat character. I love the distinction between him and regular Barry and how that feeds into the themes of the movie, obviously. Like, that works really well. Mm-hmm. But older Barry is so annoying. And
older Barry or younger Barry?
Well, younger, older as in past Barry.
Oh, okay. I'm talking about older as in age. Okay, so yes, so younger Barry.
Younger Barry, yes. Longer hair, Ezra Miller. Yeah, that he came off as like so annoying, which is obviously what they're going for. But I feel like there's ways to make characters annoying and immature without making them annoying and immature to the audience. Because at times it felt like he wasn't even a dick kid. He was a dick kid written by an adult. You know what I mean? He's throwing out things like, he's saying, "What's up, broski?" And it's like, would a Gen Z kid say that? You know what I mean? Like, he's coming off like not even like an insecure kid, but just like a fucking weirdo, you know? And it just doesn't read well. It's just kind of cringy. Like, which is obviously what they're going for.
Yeah, I feel like that was kind of the point.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's the point. You can make a character like cringy and insecure, but it's cringy to me as an audience member, as in I don't want to watch him.
The thing that I liked about younger Barry was that he confirmed all of my suspicions on why I think Ezra Miller was kind of a weird choice to play this character. But then older Barry sort of redeems it like a little bit. But while we're talking about Barry Allen, we should talk a little bit about the Allen family. This gets into some of the parts of the movie that do bug me. Some of the acting in here is not up to par. There are actors in here that are acting significantly better than I think some of the other cast.
Yeah.
Namely, I didn't like the actress for his mom very much, or Iris. I think Iris was awful in this movie.
I wouldn't say she was awful, but she was very bland. She's not in the movie for too much. Like, she's a player, but most of this takes place in this weird alternate past dimension where we never interact with her. So like, I didn't have too much of a problem with Iris, especially since she's mainly like a side character, whereas the mom is like a very integral, emotional part of this movie. And she has some bad acting. She also has some bad lines, though.
Yes.
Which she delivers pretty poorly, making them even worse. Some of these lines are just so direct. Like, they don't feel like they're written by people, you know? It's almost like George Lucas wrote this script or something. Because sometimes, like, the line is just like, it's like that one at the end where she's like, "I am a complete stranger." Okay, you don't have to say that. You know, you can let this scene ride out. And be
you're talking about when they're in the grocery store?
Yeah, that's at the very end. But there's other lines like that in this movie. I'm kind of blanking on some of them. But there's a few times in this movie where they seem to feel the need to like just directly say what's going on instead of just like letting the scene play out or thinking of maybe a more clever, natural way to write that dialogue. You know,
the mom stuff does bug me a little bit though, because we only really get like 3 scenes with her.
Yeah. And
the whole point of the movie is about like letting her live and how that influences the timeline and like Barry having to let that go. So future Barry meets up with present Barry, or I guess past Barry, and realizes that it's the night that he's supposed to get his powers. So they actually go to the crime lab and he lets him get struck by lightning. Now, one thing that I really liked about this was that, you know, people complain all the time about, like, we don't need to see a superhero's origin in the movie. Like, they say, like we don't need to see Batman's parents die again. We don't need to see Uncle Ben get shot again. And while I agree with that, I feel like a lot of times when you're bringing a character into live action, especially, this isn't the first time The Flash has been live action, but I think it's important to sort of find a way to incorporate some of those elements, especially for just casual viewers that aren't aware. And I think they found a good twist on it here, where it's like, okay, you get to see The Flash's origin, but it's not like really The Flash's origin.
Yeah. Calling this movie The Flash is kind of a weird move. You know what I mean? Because it's the first Flash movie, but it feels so climactic, like it's the last Flash movie at the same time. And you get to see his origin, but it's just done very quickly, obviously, and it's done through this other plot that is closely tied to his origin, but it's not exactly.
Yeah, younger Barry gets the powers, older Barry loses his powers, which I didn't think they had to do, because like then they do, because it's a scene from Flashpoint they do later where older Barry gets his powers again, and I'm like, just let them both have the powers.
This is another one of my sort of flaws with the movie that feeds into a bigger problem, whereas this movie, for a long portion of it, doesn't have a concrete villain. And so we're kind of bouncing around, and the movie is constantly like searching for an objective. You know, like he goes back to the past. Okay, what do we do now? Oh, he lost his powers. We got to get the powers back. Okay, now we got to meet Batman. Okay, Batman will help us. Well, he's not the right Batman. All right, well, we got to find Superman. Superman will help us. Now we got to find Superman. All right, well, what do we do? Zod's here, so we got to fight Zod. Zod is the reason this movie exists, you know? So we got to fight Zod. But now we're fighting a different Flash. You know what I mean? Like, the movie's constantly trying to find something to do, which kind of works for like a time travel adventure movie. But a lot of times during the movie, I'm like, where is this going? Like, what are we supposed to be doing here? You know what I mean? And it leads to like unnecessary scenes, like that, where Flash has to get his powers back, and oh, we have to go save Supergirl. But I mean, that's not as unnecessary in the grand scheme.
Let's talk about, so the other two big supporting roles in this movie are Supergirl and Batman.
Yes.
How do you feel about Michael Keaton's Batman in this movie?
I surprisingly liked him.
I liked him a lot.
I was going into this movie expecting to hate him from the trailers because of the cringy dialogue.
You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts.
And just seeing Michael Keaton doing like athletic Batman combat moves is kind of like jarring to me, considering like if you've watched the '89 Batman movies, he can't even turn his head. Like, he's not exactly the most combat-oriented Batman. So see him like fly around and like do spin kicks and shit like that. Like, initially in the trailers, it came off as off to me, but in the movie, I'll say the action scenes with him work.
I like that he's not even like old Batman in like the ways we've seen old Batman before. He's not like, like when Christian Bale in Dark Knight Rises is old Batman, he retires and he like is all crippled and broken down. And The Dark Knight Returns, it's sort of like a similar thing, and he has to come out of retirement. This Batman also comes out of retirement, but he's still like, he made Gotham a safer city, and he kind of reminded me of like the dude in The Big Lebowski.
I'm the
Batman.
So that's what you call me, you know?
And then when he's actually out there fighting, I was worried that like, okay, this is geezer Batman, this is senior citizen Batman. Is the combat gonna feel, like it matches? And honestly, I didn't like. A lot of people have wanted to fan cast Clint Eastwood as old Batman because he has that sort of like toughness to him. Okay. And I feel like Michael Keaton maybe is not as tough as like, Clint Eastwood type. He still brought a sort of toughness to this old Batman where he didn't feel brittle. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was worried about that as well. They don't even really give an explanation for it, but nothing was like jarring to me about watching him fight. So I guess we also have Supergirl to talk about. That's our other big player. And Supergirl also works for me, but there's not much to her really.
Yeah.
Like, she comes in, we meet her, she leaves, and we understand that she's maybe a bit more mature and angrier than Henry Cavill's Superman or any Superman for that matter.
This movie was supposed to sort of set up like a new DCEU before James Gunn came in. Michael Keaton was supposed to be the main Batman. He was going to be in the Batgirl movie. And he was described to be like more of like a Nick Fury, sort of like bringing up like the new guard, like the new Justice League. And Supergirl was supposed to be like the new main super person instead of Superman. Now obviously some of that has changed, but you can see sort of the seeds of that they're sowing here that I guess they're not really going to need to follow up on.
Yeah, I mean, I liked Supergirl in this movie. That's all I can really say about her. She's kind of just a plot device, though. Zod shows up. We need to fight Zod. Oh, two Flashes and a Batman can't beat Zod, so we have to get a Superman. Oh, we don't want to do Henry Cavill's either not down to do it, or we want a different version of Superman. Oh, it's Supergirl. Okay, fine. It works. But there's nothing like too cringy with her. There's nothing too annoying about her. She's just there, I guess you could say.
Her performance is good, but there's just not a lot of it. So that's really kind of hard to judge it in its entirety because we haven't really seen her in her own movie.
She's not bringing the movie down by any means. If anything, like, I liked watching a Superman fight,
It should be noted this movie comes out 10 years after Man of Steel came out. So this is sort of, in a weird way, like, you think about Iron Man came out in 2008 and then Infinity War came out in 2018. So this has been what DC has done with the same amount of time. And boy, is it messy.
Yeah, definitely.
Upon a second view, I will say, first and second act work pretty well for me.
Yeah.
It's the third act that starts messing with my opinions on the movie.
Okay. Where specifically in the third act?
I think it's the cameos.
Oh yeah.
And we'll talk about those a little bit. But basically, Supergirl and Batman die, and younger Barry, who's still naive, doesn't really understand that there are things that just are supposed to happen. Keeps trying to prevent these deaths.
We're not going to be able to fix this. Nobody dies!
And it's not working, and then that sort of turns him against older Barry, and then it's eventually revealed that this younger Barry keeps doing this for years and years and years, and he reveals himself as the villain, the Dark Flash, which is sort of a comic book character, it's pretty original for this.
When the objective of the movie was to beat General Zod, I was initially very underwhelmed with the movie. I was like, okay, the first two, like you said, the first 2/3 of this movie, pretty decent, pretty good. Generally I liked it a lot. But when we get to this empty threat that sort of is Zod, he's sort of like, we know who Zod is. We know he's a big threat. But I'm kind of just watching it, and I'm like, he just comes out of nowhere. We don't get a lot of good scenes of Zod in this movie. He's just a villain who shows up. He's not significant to Barry in any sort of way, which is that's what really sort of brought it down for me. I was like, are we really doing this? I guess this is our ending villain. And then when we get into the sort of the twist of, it's evil Barry who is responsible for it the entire time. I gotta say, I kind of liked that.
Yeah.
I thought that was a great twist and a fun variant on the Flashpoint story, because it's we don't have to introduce Eobarthon and Reverse Flat. We don't have to do any of that. We can just have this character that's been developing throughout the rest of the movie become this evil Flash, and it defines who the regular Flash is. I thought it was pretty great what they did with that Flash, and it actually made me like the ending a lot more than I think other people do.
Yeah, a lot of people do not like that part of it.
I really enjoyed it, though. I thought it was the perfect way to illustrate the themes of the film, But I will say, like you said, the cameos are very egregious, and there's no reason for them to be there, and they don't even do anything. I sort of heard some rumors that certain people were going to cameo in this movie, and I kind of figured, but they kind of just show up. Just they're just in the multiverse. You sort of see.
What really bugs me about the cameos is, so Andy Muschietti, the director, he went to Warner Brothers and was like, I want to put a bunch of cameos in this movie, and they gave him free reign. He could pick anybody, and the ones that they end up going with, only one of them I kind of like. Every other one I have a problem with for one reason or another. So they have both George Reeves and Christopher Reeves as Superman. The thing that bugs me about George Reeves is the one that was in black and white and was standing there. He was from an older... Now that actor killed himself because he was feeling like he was getting typecast as Superman.
Ooh. So they bring him back as Superman? Yeah, okay.
And then you see a version of Jay Garrick, which kind of looks like the one from The Flash, not the actual Jay Garrick, but the pretend Jay Garrick.
In the
that was
TV
really
show?
Zoom. Yeah. But the actor, Teddy Sears, said that he was not notified of that they sort of used his likeness, and Warner Brothers is trying to play it off like it's not his likeness, even though it pretty clearly is. They kind of even put a jab at him, saying it was just a generic looking actor. The Christopher Reeve, number one, looks bad.
Yeah, all of the cameos look bad.
I would say except for maybe Nick Cage.
Okay.
But so Christopher Reeve and Helen Slater Superman look bad, and even though they probably got the consent of his family to include him in this movie, there's other actors that are here ready to cameo, and yet they didn't go for him. You could have thrown in Brandon Routh Superman, and because he's even kind of supposed to be that Superman.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so they don't include him in there. You also see Adam West Batman kind of for a second. That one didn't bug me as much.
Yeah.
But you notice that all the cameos, other than the other Flash, it's Superman, 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 Batman, Flash. They didn't do Wonder Woman. They didn't do any of the Arrowverse characters, which I understand why they may not want to, but I feel like they would have fit better here.
Okay.
So yeah, it just felt like they kind of went with some more bland choices. Now I will say I like the Nick Cage one, mostly because it was just interesting to actually see because we've seen the test footage and the concept art for that, but it's actually interesting seeing him as Superman, even if it's only for a brief moment.
Yeah, I mean it's a cute little thing seeing him as Superman, and he's fighting the giant spider that I've heard was in the script or something like that he was supposed to fight. One slight nitpick that I have about that scene, he's wearing a different suit than the suit he's like wearing in like test footage and stuff.
There's like 10 suits for that movie.
Oh, really? Because I've only seen like the one picture where it's like a weird, like, not tie-dye, but like you kind of
the one that's kind of like has the lights running up and down it. Yeah, no, there was several different test suits. I think that suit that he's wearing is supposed to be after he's resurrected. The suit that you're thinking of is the suit that he wears while he's becoming resurrected.
Okay, see, I didn't even know that. That was like a slight nitpick I had, but I guess that's not. I was just ill-informed. My whole problem with the cameos is not necessarily, now that I know the ones that they picked and you said all of that, like I completely agree that like some of those are fucking terrible.
Yeah.
But my whole problem is mainly just like the idea of the scene in general. Like I get the idea that this is a multiverse movie and so we're gonna see different versions of these characters and probably past versions. But it was just kind of like a big eye roll for me where I'm like, do we need this? Like, I know did you say the director went to the...
Yes.
Okay. Because even if the director went to the studio and like asked them to do this, it feels like they're just forced in. Like there's no reason for them to be there. And it feels like they're almost there because they know it'll get butts in seats.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, there's rumors that Nick Cage Superman will be in the movie. Well, that'll get people to go see the movie. And so when I saw that scene, I was just like, this is just kind of like a cheap ploy. It's not like Michael Keaton Batman coming back where I surprisingly like him and I'm like, wow, it's refreshing to see this cool take on this new hero or this old hero. They're just there. They're just marketing. And that's it. That's what bugged me about the scene.
Barry goes back and he has this moment with his mother where he gets to kind of sort of say goodbye to her and then he'll return back to his normal timeline. How'd you feel about that scene?
I kind of loved it. And there's just like 2 or 3 things that will bother me. Like 2 things really. We talked about the mother's dialogue earlier, like a bit of an eye roll, doesn't completely pull down the scene for me. Another thing that kind of bugged me, and like, this is probably something that's just gonna bug me. I don't see like this being like a big complaint. Once again, it's like a nitpick. But like, he's wearing these clothes with like tags on them and stuff like that. And I'm watching this scene and like, he looks like a crazy person.
Yes.
And the mother's just like down to like hug him and console him, which I guess is like, oh, okay, it's a testament to how good of a mother she is or something. But like, I'm rolling the scene in my head and I'm like, this isn't how humans behave. This is just how we need the script to go so our story works. Like, just take off the tags and make them look like a regular person. I get you want to do a funny visual gag because this movie's like humorous, but like, you're pulling down the scene just a little bit for me.
I agree that it feels sort of strange that she would just like hug this stranger that's like crying to her in public. But no, I mean, they were trying to play it off as, oh, she's just like such a great motherly figure. Yeah.
The acting on Ezra Miller's part is pretty good. And like, you know, obviously the idea of the scene is great. The way he kind of like, didn't he like take the tomatoes out?
Yes.
And then he like comes back to see her like one more time and he just sort of like puts his head there. Like, it's a very like, in a way, it's a well-directed scene. There's just a few stupid direction things about it that irk me.
Yeah. Okay, this is one thing that kind of bugs me. So the whole movie is about him learning like some things have to happen. You can't save everybody. There's not a solution for every problem. And then he throws in a solution for a problem right at the end where he switches the tomato sauce so that way his father is seen on the camera, so he reaches for the top shelf so that way he's exonerated. Like, the whole movie is about like there are things you can't change and a lot of ripples that you can't. And I guess they kind of follow that up with like the George Clooney inclusion. But like the whole movie is about him learning you have to let some things happen, and then he still makes a change that benefits him in the future.
Yeah, that is a little cheap. I mean, the ultimate goal was to save his mom, and he didn't do that. So the movie is still effective in that way as a movie. But yeah, I noticed that as well, and it did kind of bug me that like, oh, so we do have a solution to this problem. Like, you would almost expect this movie to end off worse for Barry. And like, sort of like how No Way Home ends, where everything ends off worse for him, but he's like, I have this resiliency now. Like, that would be like a really cool ending. I guess they just wanted to go with a lighter tone.
See, I didn't hate that that's the way it ended.
Yeah,
but
me neither.
It just is sort of opposite of the point they just made.
Yeah.
Some people think that Clooney might be the James Gunn Batman. I don't think that's it at all. I think
there's no way.
I think this was just sort of a gag and also just a funny way to bring him in.
Yeah.
I loved that part, honestly, when
Yeah,
he came in.
it's a great little joke scene. I mean,
Yeah.
the movie, like I said, it's tonally pretty comedic all the way through. So to end on this nice, funny, happy beat, and seeing Clooney again is nice, considering like how much shit he gets for this role.
Yeah.
For him to like come back and be like, I'm Batman, and just sort of like making fun of himself, but at the same time like giving him his due in a way, but giving him a reference.
It gets cheers from people, you know? So like, I think, you know, in time people sort of realize that, you know, maybe they took those movies too seriously and they weren't supposed to.
Maybe we shouldn't be getting up in arms and ending our lives over a Batman movie.
Do you want a sequel to this? And more importantly, maybe, do you want Ezra to continue as the Flash?
I mean, no and no.
Okay.
I think I think this is a fine enough end to the DCEU. It gives you a lot of fan service moments, which is what these fans want, what these Snyder fans and stuff want. Ezra Miller obviously is a horrendous person.
Yeah.
So there's no way. I don't even know if he'd be able to play the Flash if he goes to jail or prison or wherever he belongs. You know?
Now, one thing that does bug me, the director has said that he wants to make the script for the sequel is there. He wants to make it, and Ezra is his only Flash. Now, here's the thing: you're going to recast Ben Affleck, Henry Cavill. You know, you're going to throw in Michael Keaton. You're going to even recast him with George Clooney again, and then you're going to recast George Clooney again. Just recast Barry Allen or do a new Flash or whatever, but they're making it sound like that Ezra might still be this universe's Flash, and that's kind of why I don't like the way they ended it with even seeing him in this new universe. This should just be either the end of that Barry Allen but you know, who's to say? We don't even know what they're doing. And maybe they could bring Reverse Flash into a sequel. That's one thing that some people are complaining about. This movie's lack of Reverse Flash or lack of like Barry's interest in the details about who murdered his mother. But yeah, I don't think we need a sequel to this. But if they do want to follow up on it, because I think there are some interesting aspects, you have to recast.
Yeah. I mean, that just makes the most sense. And you've already introduced the multiverse, so it's like, who really cares? But will we even get the chance for a sequel to this movie? If they're trying to do a new DC universe and establish it as different, and we just got this movie, which is a conclusion, and on top of all of that, it seems to be underperforming.
Yes.
I can't really see Warner Brothers greenlighting a sequel for this movie, because it would just be too big of a mess to handle.
All right, Braden. It's ratings time.
Before we get to ratings, though, I know that I know this review's long enough already.
Wind back the clock. Sure.
Yeah, let's run back in time. I want to talk a little bit just about like some positives of this film.
Yes, okay.
We've been incredibly negative, and like I said at the beginning of this review, I didn't hate this movie.
Yes.
You know, like I think we both have been pretty negative, like in like specifically you too. You too.
Yes.
But like I did like this movie. I thought this movie was pretty fun throughout the entirety of it. There's just a lot of cringy and sort of illogical things that drag it down for me in terms of like qualities and like giving this a good rating score, but like in terms of like a movie, this is a very fun time travel film.
I will say, I like the script. Like sometimes the dialogue is bad, but I think some of that has to do with the direction and the actors. But like I was thinking about like if I read this script on paper, I'd be like, hell yeah, let's make this movie.
Oh yeah. I mean, this movie has great ideas for scenes in it. You know, like I think this director maybe is like, or maybe the writers of this script are like not so good at writing dialogue, but great at like constructing scenes and like having a good solid theme and narrative, because it's like, I like this Barry, I like the journey he goes on, I like the villain at the very end, I like this whole like fun time travel plot, the ways the speed is used. It's a really fun movie to watch, you know?
Yes, as far as strengths go, I think Ezra's performance is surprisingly pretty good. I think Keaton's performance is good. I think, again, some of the writing, stronger in some areas than others, but there are strengths to it. People really complain about the CGI. Really, for me, it's the cameo scene that makes the CGI egregious. Other parts of the movie, the CGI didn't bother me nearly as much.
It's just, eventually you just kind of get used to it.
Yeah.
And at no point did it really bog down the movie for me, unless the scene itself was bad. Like, I didn't like those cameos because they were forced and shoehorned in. And on top of that, they looked ugly. You know, I like the ideas of the speed scenes, and so those are still pretty enjoyable scenes, despite the CGI not quite being there to support that, you know?
Yeah. So there are strengths to the movie.
Yes.
There are some strong weaknesses too.
I would also like to say, before we get into ratings, I would put this movie above, say, a Black Adam.
Yes.
Above a Wonder Woman 2.
Yes.
I haven't seen Shazam 2, but probably above that
Yes.
one. Above some Marvel movies, probably too, like Ant-Man and the Wasp, any of the terrible ones. Because the biggest compliment I can give this movie is it tried something. They choose and make choices constantly in this movie, and it's an experience to watch. It's not your typical boring blockbuster superhero movie. They actually wanted to do something with this film. Whether that works sometimes or doesn't work, that will always be more entertaining to watch than those movies.
They even if they tried and spectacularly failed, it's better to see them spectacularly fail. I don't think this is a spectacular fail. I think it fails in a couple regards.
Right.
But I think generally this is a good movie. I wouldn't call it a great movie. I wouldn't call it a bad movie. I could definitely see that argument though. But I would say that this is a good movie, and it's a good Flash movie to an extent. I do think there are scenes that the TV show executes better. I mean, now they have an advantage of having a little more time with that Flash.
Right. Overall, I think my score for this movie, it's gonna sit at like a 3.5 for me.
Okay.
I think that's a pretty solid rating. The good stuff's good, but it just has a few things in it that bog it down, that make me have to take off points. Sometimes I'm cringing at the screen, and overall, I had fun time though.
My score, the first time I saw it, was like a 2.5. Upon another view, I'm going to bump it up to a 3. I could have seen myself bumping it up a little bit, even if just the cameos were different. It's really like that's what really brings the movie down for me. I think the Snyder Cut executes some of these things better. But overall, again, I understand why they released it, regardless of the controversy with Ezra Miller, which, again, kind of sucks that a shitty person gets the limelight like this, but apparently it's not going too well for them financially. So, you know, you win some, you lose some. I feel like I had more positive things to say about this movie than you did, and yet your score is higher.
yeah. That 0.5 for me is really just like me giving them an applause for like letting a director do something. Like this is to me like something that's like a generic superhero movie like Black Adam would be like a 2 or a 1 or like a, you know, something where I'm like, this is so bogged down and so boring. But this movie's fun throughout, and they did stuff with it.
Check it out.
Yeah,
I mean, just if at all, just for pure curiosity of it, because like you said, this movie, you were very curious about it, and I mean, it answered questions, it left things unanswered, and then it was just over.
Much like life.
Yeah. All right, Braden. Let's bid the video adieu.
Like brunch. Like, what is brunch? You wait in line for an hour for essentially lunch.
Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.